Hi, this is Abhinav Kaiser. The topic of today's presentation is achieving balance in service operations. This is what I will cover today. I will give you a 40,000 feet introduction to what service operations is all about according to ITIL. Then I'm going to introduce the 4 balances that are identified in the ITIL service operations publication. I assume that you are ITIL Foundation certified. The topic of this presentation, achieving balance in service operations, comes in the second tier of ITIL certifications, which is ITIL Intermediate, more specifically known as Lifecycle Service Operations, which is LSO, and in Operational Support and Analysis, OSA. Before I get into the topic of today's presentation, I'll quickly recap what service operations is all about. Service operations is responsible for business as usual activities. They ensure that status quo is maintained. What it means is that whatever is running must keep running. If they stop running, service operation comes into the picture and fixes things to bring it back to where it was earlier. The activities that are to be performed in the service operations phase and the SLA targets to be adhered to are passed on from the service transition phase. The service transition is the phase which is responsible for implementing processes and deploying infrastructure. Some high-level activities that come under service operations include management of data centers, infrastructure such as servers and switches, applications that the business uses, tools such as monitoring and vulnerability assessment tools, and end-to-end maintenance of services such as emails, internet, and file storage. On a day-to-day basis, typical activities of service operations include resolution of incidents, fulfilling service requests, providing accesses to employees, and management of monitoring tools that monitor the availability and capacity of servers, switches, storage, and other infrastructure. Let us discuss the various balances that are identified in the ITIL Service Operations publication. ITIL Service Operation has identified 4 major balances that are to be achieved in the service operations lifecycle phase in order to successfully manage and maintain IT services. They are internal IT view versus external business view, stability versus responsiveness, cost versus quality, reactiveness versus proactiveness. This list is not comprehensive at the least. There are a number of other balances that the IT organization must play with, like employees' work-life balance. Organization must look toward balancing situations and not completely lean towards one side or the other. As we are aware, we can become obese by consuming plenty of fatty foods and are susceptible to diseases like gout by consuming excess amounts of protein. So, anything in excess is bad for all situations. The point being, balance is necessary. In this case, a balanced diet would do a world of good. An IT organization is like a motorcycle manufacturer. Plenty of work would have gone into designing the motorcycle and building it up from raw materials. Once the product is ready, if it cannot balance the rider on its 2 wheels, the whole purpose of its existence gets nullified. Even if the rider balances, he must be able to go in the direction and target he wishes to, and that is possible only through the right balance. Likewise, an IT organization must balance all the delicate situations and find a suitable balance. Without balance, targets are not achieved, conflicts arise, and the smooth working of organization becomes distant dreams. Let's look at the first type of balance to be achieved in service operations: internal IT view against external business view. Internal IT view is management of systems and components by the IT organization. Some examples include management of servers, switches, and desktops, among others. In a typical IT organization, you will have a number of teams working on IT aspects like a team for managing servers, a team for networks, a team for storage systems, and so on. Each IT team is made responsible for the management of their systems and upkeep of components. The team's focus is on system performance and availability. The internal IT view organization focuses on these individual elements rather than how they add up to deliver the service. For example, in an email service, you have servers, applications, networks, desktops, and laptops making up the entire service. A company that is internally focused will provide a list of responsibilities, activities, and roles related to specific technology and teams. Whether the roles and responsibilities as carried out by the server team, for example, translates into meeting customers' requirements is not a priority. Here is a real-life experience from my consulting experience. The KPI for a particular server is 99%. And the customer's requirement for email service availability is 99.9%. If the server goes down, the email service goes down with it. And with a KPI of 99% for the server, the IT organization will underperform on the promises made to the customer every time. On the other end of the spectrum, we have external business view, which is the way IT services are seen by the users and customers. Examples are email, internet, and file storage services, among others. An organization that is extremely focused on its external services rather than what is happening internally do not care about the technology that is being leveraged, the way the company is managed, and the architecture that is employed. They end up making promises to the customer without knowing the ground reality of how they can achieve what is being asked of them. For example, a customer asks for all priority incidents to be resolved within 2 hours. The customer is fair in asking whatever he wants. For all we know, he may ask for us to put a man on the moon yet again. It is up to the IT organization to agree or disagree on this requirement, that is, resolving all incidents within 2 hours. An organization with extreme focus on the business will perhaps agree to this demand without checking with the team managers and practice heads whether implementing this requirement would be practical and possible. To sum it up, an IT organization which is focused internally ends up not meeting the business needs, and an IT organization that focuses externally under-delivers on the promises made to the customer. An IT organization needs to be both internally as well as externally focused. They need to have one foot on both ends of the bridge. They need to understand the internal reality and also be customer focused to make the customer feel important and wanted. Today, you will find mature organizations with good management teams achieving this balance. The next balance equation that we intend to achieve in service operations is between stability and responsiveness. The design of IT services is evaluated on the basis of stability. Stability dictates the availability and reliability of an IT service. For example, in the case of a web hosting service, if the IT infrastructure is stable and has been up every single second for the past 3 months, that translates into the service having no downtime for the past 3 months. This is stability, and this is what the customer needs. Any outage of services will lead to customer impact, and mostly the impact translates into financial losses, so the customer would expect your infrastructure to be extremely stable. So what happens if an organization is extremely stable? For one, the resources who are deployed for the maintenance of IT infrastructure will have zero experience in handling outages if it ever happens. Anything can happen in IT, no matter how stable it is. As the saying goes, prepare for the worst and plan for the best. How can this organization, which has no experience on outages, prepare for the worst if they do not get an opportunity for hands-on troubleshooting experience. Also, as you are aware, IT is evolving all the time. The technology of today is redundant tomorrow. So, in a stable environment, an IT organization will find it uncompelled to make changes to the IT infrastructure in fear of losing this acquired stability. Although the new technology can offer better service levels and better customer experience, banking organizations today still vouch for stability, and hence most of them are running on mainframe computers as opposed to modern technology. So there is a good chance that stable organizations put their stability ahead of business requirements, which will eventually render them untouchables in the IT market. While we have a North Pole, we have a South Pole as well. The South Pole in this balance equation is being over responsive. Responsiveness is the ability of an organization to respond to changing IT environment, like upgrading to a newer technology without impacting the IT services offered to the customer. For example, if a bank decides to transition from mainframe technology to a Java-based engine with all the existing and additional features, a responsive organization will be in a good position to carry out this transformation. Organizations that are highly responsive tend to be at the forefront of technology, toying with latest trends and conducting a number of experiments. The end result is twofold. Number one, most technological changes involve a downtime of services. Customers will not be able to use the services during the transition, and not only that, when changes are implemented, a number of defects and misconfigurations are exposed, leading to further outages in the form of incidents. The customer, although agrees to new technology implementation, he will not be happy with the number of outages he has to face. Remember that outages translate into financial implications. For example, if a certain website for an insurance customer is not available for an hour, the losses will mount up to thousands of dollars. I'm quoting this from my working experience. Number two, the IT organization, in a bid to stay ahead in the technology race, implements a number of technological changes, some necessary and some aren't. These changes will be expenditures for the IT organization. More the changes, more they have to shell out. Not only the cost of changes include changes to the IT infrastructure, but also the cost they have to bear by engaging resources when incidents are reported, which are an outcome of the implemented changes. And if the outages end up affecting the SLA targets, there may be financial penalties imposed by the customer as well. The same thing to do is to achieve balance between stability and responsiveness. Like we discussed, a highly stable organization is likely to ignore business requirements, and a highly responsive organization might spend a bit too much onto changes. How can an organization achieve balance between the two? The IT organization must ensure that the IT infrastructure is stable for a certain period of time before going in for a change. Once the change is implemented successfully, there must be a waiting period to see if things have stabilized. Once stability is achieved, move on to the next change, and so on. By implementing changes before achieving stability, you're risking falling into a quicksand which will sink you even before you realize that you are indeed going down. Balancing cost and quality is a puzzle that no organization has been able to rule over. The intended trend is to reduce the cost and increase the quality. It's like going to a car showroom and expecting to buy an Audi at a price lesser than that of a Camry. It just does not happen. Yet companies strive to achieve this task of impossibility. Companies must cost their services competitively in order to survive in this cutthroat market. Customers look at the cost first and then peep into the rest of the features next. So it is imperative that the cost quotient remains at par with the market. To state an example, for the cost of services, your cell phone plan will tell you exactly how many minutes you get in a month and how much internet you could use during the same period. Any extra consumption will be charged accordingly to a rate chart which is shared with you before you buy the service. Companies that are hell-bent on reducing costs end up sacrificing quality for their own temporary performance showcase. They tend to do the bare minimums and haggle with the customer over petty matters. As you would expect, the customer would not be too pleased with the IT and the ratings goes down. It's like when you go to a Mexican restaurant, the tortilla chips that you get to enjoy free of cost gives you more pleasure than the fajita burritos you pay for. The little extra thing they offer makes our lunch complete. Customer satisfaction rating generally goes through the roof. What if the Mexican restaurant decides to cut costs and not offer the free chips? Would you be as happy as you were earlier? Would you go back to the restaurant? You know the answer. Likewise, an IT company into cutting costs will lose customers eventually. What is possible though is increasing quality by investing more and over a period of time cashing in on the capital investment made. In business language, realizing return on investment, ROI. To state an example, let's say an IT organization provides web services to a customer. Every time the end user loses or forgets the password, the user would call in the IT organization and have it reset. To improve the service and the overall quality, the IT organization introduced a web self-help system where users can reset their own passwords. The cost of this solution was huge, but it ensured that the IT organization can afford to reduce the headcount of its employees, and over a period of time they were able to break even. And beyond the break-even point, the company was able to make increased profits due to a better quality of service. It was a win-win situation as the IT organization was making more money than earlier and users were able to reset passwords at their whims and fancy. They didn't have to wait in line for the service desk agent to answer the call and go through the motion of getting a ticket logged. On the other side of the spectrum, there are IT organizations that are too much into quality. They live by their quality principles and give utmost importance to quality improvements over everything else. Quality is absolutely necessary in IT service, but the levels of quality differs from one service to another. We cannot pinpoint a quality threshold for certain types of services. For example, if an IT organization is providing IT service to a space shuttle carrying 300 passengers, you would want the quality to be as close to 100% as possible. And for an IT service like providing text messaging on cell phones, the quality factor can compromise up to a certain extent, say around 90%. To reiterate, every IT service will demand a different quality level. The skill is to identify the required level and achieve it at a minimal cost, thereby reaching the point of optimization. Reaching for high quality has its pitfalls too. The most common one is the inflated cost of quality improvement. The IT organization ends up spending more on the quality than its coffers can afford. They start getting beaten on the profits, and this company is likely to go bankrupt despite having excellent quality credentials. Like I mentioned earlier, the idea is to reach the optimum level and leave it at that. Stating an example, while customers expected better prices from their cell phone company, they expect much better quality. They want value for money they are paying. So an IT organization is expected to provide quality, but what is quality? The customer defines how quality looks and feels like. Going back to the example of the cell phone company, the customer will expect the cell phone service provider to spread the coverage wherever the customer goes. The customer expects no calls to be dropped and probably expects to have high-speed internet across all coverage areas. There are IT organizations that venture too much into the forbidden forest called as quality. What they don't realize is that if the customer specifications are met, then that conforms to the quality conformance. Going beyond the customer specifications results in increased costs. As I mentioned earlier, the IT organization ends up spending more on the quality and that will reduce their profits. And this company is likely to go bankrupt even though they have excellent quality credentials. Am I saying that quality is not necessary? Absolutely not. It is extremely important, but it needs to be set by the customer and the cost of the service must be dependent on the quality that is being asked of. Why are some products more expensive than the others even though they offer the same set of features? The answer is quality, period. So, in effect, an IT company into cutting costs is most likely cutting down the quality of service they offer. And the company that delivers high quality is probably not making too much profits. The balance is to stay in between. The graph on the next slide throws light on how the cost increases as the quality gets better. Cost is depicted on the y-axis while quality is on the x-axis. Initially, when you start bringing in quality improvements, the cost to implement is reasonable. Say increasing availability from 30% to 70% may work out economically. You will find that as you progress in quality, costs escalate quickly. For example, if you want to improve the availability of the system from 70% to 90%, you may be looking at a cost in excess of what you spent on improving from 30% to 70%. Well, beyond 90%, for every percentage increase, you might end up spending the same as from 70% to 90%. As you move up the quality ladder, if you want to improve availability from 99.8% to 99.9%, you might end up spending a fortune. Well, you need to find the plateau as illustrated in the graph, which is the region of optimum cost and quality. This is the balance we are looking to achieve in order to stay competitive in the market and financially viable. In IT, being reactive and active proactively are perhaps the most common words thrown in emails and in meetings, especially when they're used in the context of IT services. Managers and leadership teams, whenever they address their employees, emphasize on being proactive. They make it sound as though proactiveness is all about positivity, like preventing a crime from happening, and reactiveness as negativity, like conducting an autopsy and investigating to find a killer. Is it really true that proactiveness is on the positive side of the spectrum and reactivity on the other extreme? We are talking about balance today. And by now after going through the earlier three balances, you would have assumed that you need to be somewhere between reactivity and proactivity. Yes, indeed, that is where organizations need to stand. Reactive organizations typically do not act unless there is a trigger. The trigger could be services going down, which is nothing but an incident. Customer complaining about IT services, and when customer comes in with new business requirements. On the other hand, proactive organizations are always on a lookout to improve their services, organization skills, and other customer service components. They do not wait for the customer or the monitoring tool to tell them what needs to be done, but instead they find ways to identify new requirements through trending or finding out bugs in the system before it causes incidents. As I mentioned earlier, proactive approach is considered positive, and I agree. It is indeed positive, but extreme positivity is experience. You might introduce a change into the system that is not needed. On the other hand, being reactive is like being laid back. You don't do something until somebody tells you to. Being reactive does not make the customer happy, and by being reactive, there is every chance that the customer SLAs are not met, like meeting the target uptime in a month. But in a reactive organization, employees know how to take pressure and how to handle difficult situations during firefighting. In a proactive organization, the need to handle erratic pressure, as is the case with reactiveness, does not arise. So, if a situation such as that arises, there is a good chance that they may crumble under pressure. To reiterate, an organization that is highly reactive may not support the business strategy by not keeping up to the commitments, and an organization that is highly reactive may introduce a change that is not really needed. As we discussed earlier, changes are expenditures and these go out from the IT organization's pockets. So, in an ideal organization, the balance must be more towards proactiveness and a decent measure attributed towards reactiveness. It is also a fact that newer organizations tend to be more on the reactive front due to the lack of operational data and the knowledge of handling services that come from experience. Older organizations in the service industry tend to be a lot more proactive than the newer ones. That brings us to the end of this presentation. Let's recap what we went through. We spoke of the importance of maintaining balance in the service operations lifecycle phase. I introduced the 4 balances that are identified in the service operations publication. There are many more balances in IT organization, and these 4 are perhaps the most important. The first balance we looked at is balancing internal IT against external business view. If an organization is extremely focused on internal IT, they may end up not meeting the business needs, and if an organization is focused on the customer and his business, then the IT organization might make promises that they would find it hard to keep up with. The second balance is between stability and responsiveness. An organization that is extremely stable may not be open to changes and hence ignore business requirements. An organization that is highly responsive may overspend on changes that are not really necessary. The third balance is between cost and quality. An organization into cost cutting may sacrifice quality, and an organization that commits wholly into quality may spend plenty of money in delivering the services and hence may not make profits or even go bankrupt. The last balance is between reactive and proactive. A highly reactive organization may not support business strategy as they are always waiting for something to happen, a trigger. A highly proactive organization may be extremely enthusiastic that they may end up introducing changes that are not needed. In each of the balances, organizations must strive to live between the spectrum and not at extreme ends. Thank you for listening. This is Abhinav Kaiser signing off.